several times. The detectives came very close to catching the East Area Rapist. Each time it seemed like they might finally capture him, he managed to escape. Here are some stories of those near captures. One night, police officers were patrolling a neighborhood known for recent attacks. A neighbor called to report a suspicious person. When the police arrived, they saw a man running into the dark. They chased him for a while but lost him in the maze of backyards and alleys. It was frustratingly close, but he got away. Detectives hid in a house they believed the rapist might target. They waited quietly in the dark, but the East Area Rapist never showed up. Later, they found out he had watched the house from a distance and saw the hidden police. He was too smart to get caught that night. The East Area Rapist wasn't just physically strong. He was also very good at playing mind games. He used psychological tactics to scare people even more. During attacks, he whispered threats into his victims' ears, telling them he would come back if they told anyone. This made people too scared to talk about what happened. He often called his victims before and after the attacks. Sometimes, he said nothing and just breathed heavily into the phone. Other times, he whispered frightening messages. These calls made people feel unsafe even after the attack was over. In some cases, he left small clues behind, like a piece of clothing or a note. These clues were meant to remind the victims and the community that he was still out there. The detectives knew they needed to understand more about the East Area Rapist to catch him. They worked with experts called profilers who study the behavior of criminals to create a profile. They looked at how the rapist committed his crimes. They noted things like the times he attacked, the way he broke into homes, and how he treated his victims. This helped them understand his methods. Profilers tried to get inside the rapist's mind. They studied his actions to figure out what kind of person he might be. Was he organized or chaotic? Did he plan his attacks carefully or act spontaneously? Using all the information they gathered, the profilers created a profile. They described what the rapist might look like, his possible age, his habits, and even his job. They shared this profile with the public and police officers, hoping someone would recognize him. The East Area Rapist was very clever and always seemed to stay one step ahead of the detectives. He would change his tactics and make sure not to leave too many clues. He understood how the police worked and did everything he could to avoid getting caught. Despite this cat-and-mouse game, the police and the community never gave up. Each near capture and narrow escape only strengthened their resolve. They became more vigilant and determined to support law enforcement in any way they could. The efforts to profile the rapist and understand his behavior were essential parts of the investigation. Even though it took time and many setbacks, these efforts laid the groundwork for eventually catching the East Area Rapist. The East Area Rapist was a very complicated person. Profilers worked hard to understand his mind, creating a psychological profile that explained some key traits. He was smart and very careful. He planned his attacks and made sure he didn't leave many clues. He paid great attention to details, like picking specific houses and learning the routines of his victims. He knew how to scare people and control them through fear. He could act like a normal person in daily life, but then become a dangerous criminal during his attacks. The East Area Rapist led a double life. This means he was a completely different person when he wasn't committing crimes. On the outside, he seemed like an ordinary person with an ordinary life. He likely had a job, friends, and maybe even a family. He did things like go to the store, visit friends, and do regular daily activities that didn't raise suspicions. He knew how to blend in. He acted so normal that no one would ever guess he was capable of such terrible crimes. He spent time planning his attacks so that no one connected them to his everyday life. This careful planning allowed him to stay hidden for a long time. Understanding the personal life and background of the East Area Rapist can give us clues about why he did what he did. He might have had a troubled childhood or difficult experiences that made him angry or hurt deep inside. He was very good at keeping secrets. He never talked about his crimes with others, and he hid his criminal activities from everyone in his life. He was a master of disguise, not by changing his appearance, but by hiding his dark side behind a mask of normality. This skillful deception made it difficult for anyone to suspect him. He had an unsettling ability to control his emotions and actions, making him appear calm and collected even in the midst of committing horrific acts. Understanding why the East Area Rapist committed his crimes can help us see into his psyche or mind. He might have been driven by a need to feel powerful and in control. Hurting others gave him a twisted sense of power over them. He could have been seeking excitement or thrills. The danger of his actions might have given him a rush that he craved. He might have had unresolved anger or grudges from his past. His crimes could have been a way to take out his frustrations on innocent people. He might have experienced pleasure from seeing others in pain and fear. This sadistic enjoyment is a sign of a deeply disturbed mind. The East Area Rapist lived a lie every day. To his friends, family, and co-workers, he was just another person. But underneath that facade, he was planning and committing terrible crimes. His ability to hide his true nature showed how deeply troubled and dangerous he was. Despite his attempts to blend in, the community and the police never stopped searching for the person behind the mask. They knew that catching him was crucial to bringing peace and safety back to their lives. As time went on, advancements in forensic science and the dedication of law enforcement would eventually shine a light on the dual life of the East Area Rapist. His mask would finally be removed, revealing the person behind the monstrous crimes. The story of the East Area Rapist is not just about terror, but also about the resilience and determination of the people he tried to break. Their courage and persistence were key in unmasking and understanding the true nature of the silent terror that had haunted them for so long. After many years of hard work, there came a time when the investigation into the East Area Rapist seemed to slow down. This happened because all the leads, or clues, dried up. The detectives had followed every possible clue but still couldn't catch the rapist. Without new information or evidence, the case went cold. In the early 2000s, many police departments started forming special groups called cold case units. These units had detectives who focused on solving old cases that had gone cold. They believed that with new technology and fresh eyes, they might find clues that had been missed before. One of the first things the cold case units did was re-examine old evidence. This means they looked at all the evidence collected from the crime scenes many years ago. Thanks to new technology, they could test old evidence in ways that weren't possible before. For example, they could use DNA testing, which was not available in the 1970s and 1980s. They went over all the old witness statements again. Sometimes, with the passage of time and new techniques, they could find new insights from the old testimonies. They carefully checked all the evidence to see if anything had been overlooked or missed the first time around. The rise of cold case units also brought new investigative techniques that helped find new leads. This powerful tool helped identify suspects with a high degree of certainty. Detectives collected DNA samples from crime scenes and compared them with a national database of DNA profiles. Cold case detectives used computer databases to find connections between old cases. They could now look for similar patterns in crimes that happened in different places and times. With more advanced psychological profiling techniques, experts could better understand the behavior and motivations of the East Area Rapist. This helped make a more accurate profile of the suspect. Detectives also used digital forensics to analyze any electronic records or communications that might relate to the crime. Even small pieces of digital footprint could provide important clues. The re-examination of old evidence and the use of new techniques brought renewed hope to the investigation of the East Area Rapist. Families of the victims, who had waited for years for justice, could now believe that the criminal might finally be caught. The community continued to support the renewed efforts by cold case units. People provided tips and information, even if it seemed small, as it could be the missing piece of the puzzle. The detectives worked closely with the community to make sure no stone was left unturned. The cold case unit's work was a testament to the unyielding determination to solve the case, no matter how many years had passed. Their persistence and the advancement in technology gave everyone hope that the East Area Rapist would eventually face justice for his crimes. Over the years, forensic science has made amazing progress, especially in the field of DNA technology. DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, is like a blueprint for all living things. It carries the genetic information that makes each person unique. Scientists found ways to use DNA to help solve crimes, even after many years have passed. These advancements meant that cold cases, like the one involving the East Area Rapist, had new hope for being solved. The technology to analyze DNA became more precise, allowing detectives to match tiny samples of DNA to suspects with great accuracy. DNA profiling is the process of examining DNA samples to identify individuals. First, detectives collect samples from the crime scene. This could be hair, blood, saliva, or other biological materials. Scientists in a lab extract the DNA from these samples. The DNA is then copied many times to make it easier to study. The extracted DNA is analyzed to create a DNA profile. This profile is like a unique fingerprint that identifies a person. The DNA profile is compared to profiles stored in a national database. If there's a match, it means the sample came from that person. The importance of DNA profiling in modern criminal investigations cannot be overstated. It allows detectives to identify suspects and link them to crime scenes with a high degree of certainty. This scientific method has become a powerful tool in solving crimes. One of the biggest breakthroughs in the East Area Rapist case came from reanalyzing DNA samples collected from the original crime scenes. Here's how it happened. Even though the crimes happened many years ago, the detectives preserved the evidence carefully. Items like clothing, hair samples, and other biological materials were stored properly, ensuring they could be examined later. With the advent of new DNA technology, scientists could extract and analyze DNA from these old samples more accurately than before. Cold case detectives sent the preserved evidence to modern labs for retesting. Using advanced DNA techniques, the labs were able to create new, detailed DNA profiles from the old samples. The new DNA profiles were compared against the National DNA Database. This time, there was a match. The DNA from the crime scenes matched a profile in the database, leading detectives to a suspect who fit the profile of the East Area Rapist. The breakthrough with DNA technology demonstrated its importance in modern criminal investigations. It highlighted how science can help solve even the oldest and coldest cases. Thanks to advancements in DNA profiling, detectives were able to identify the East Area Rapist, bringing hope and relief to the victims and their families. The re-examination of old evidence using advanced DNA technology marked a new chapter in the pursuit of justice. It showed that no matter how much time had passed, the efforts to bring a criminal to justice never stopped. The power of DNA technology gave new strength to investigations and renewed the hope of solving cases that seemed impossible before. It stood as a reminder to law enforcement and communities that science and persistence could work hand in hand to achieve justice. The story of the DNA revolution is not just about catching a criminal. It's also about the dedication of detectives and scientists who tirelessly worked for years. Their collective efforts showed that with the right tools and determination, old crimes could be solved and peace could be restored to the communities affected by fear and loss. There were several key moments that turned the East Area Rapist investigation around, leading to crucial breakthroughs. The reanalysis of old DNA samples was a game changer. When the DNA from the crime scenes matched a profile in the National DNA Database, it gave detectives a solid lead. Over time, the public became more involved. People reported anything suspicious, and even small pieces of information helped steer the investigation in the right direction. These special teams of detectives worked tirelessly, re-examining every piece of evidence and exploring new leads with fresh eyes and modern technology. One of the most significant tools that led to identifying the East Area Rapist was the use of genealogical databases. Detectives uploaded the DNA profile of the rapist to public genealogical databases. These are databases where people submit their DNA to learn about their ancestry and find relatives. The DNA from the crime scenes matched with distant relatives of the rapist who had submitted their DNA to these databases. This provided a web of genetic connections. Using these connections, detectives could build family trees, tracing back and narrowing down potential suspects who fit the profile of the East Area Rapist. The identification of the East Area Rapist was not just about technology. It involved a lot of hard detective work. Detectives meticulously analyzed the family trees created from the genealogical matches. They looked at each branch of the family, trying to find someone who matched the criminal profile and lived in the right places at the right times. Once they had a strong suspect, detectives conducted surveillance. This means they secretly watched the suspect's movements, gathering more information and checking if he matched the behavior patterns of the East Area Rapist. Detectives needed to confirm their suspicion with a new DNA sample from the suspect. They did this discreetly, sometimes by collecting something the suspect threw away, like a cup or a tissue. This new sample was then tested against the DNA from the crime scenes. When the new DNA sample confirmed a match with the DNA from the crime scenes, detectives knew they had their suspect. This was the pivotal moment that brought them closer to solving the case. With the DNA evidence and a strong case built from years of investigation, detectives moved in to arrest the suspect. This was a highly coordinated effort to ensure the arrest went smoothly and safely. Once everything was in place, law enforcement planned a careful operation to arrest the East Area Rapist. Detectives met to plan the arrest down to the smallest detail. They wanted to ensure everyone's safety, including their own and the suspects. The arrest team included many officers who had different roles. Some watched the suspect's house, others were ready to make the arrest, and others secured the area. On the day of the arrest, officers surrounded the suspect's house. When he came outside, they approached him calmly but firmly, telling him he was under arrest. He was taken into custody without any incident. The news of the arrest spread quickly, bringing many emotions. Victims and their families felt a huge sense of relief and joy. They had waited many years for this moment and were grateful that justice was finally served. Many families cried tears of closure. Knowing that the person who had caused so much pain and fear was now in custody helped them begin to heal. The entire community rallied together, showing support for the victims and appreciation for the detectives who never gave up. People sent messages of gratitude to the law enforcement officers. They appreciated the dedication and hard work that went into solving the case. The arrest of the East Area Rapist marked a new chapter for the survivors. While the memories of the past could not be erased, knowing that the person responsible was finally caught brought a sense of peace. It also gave them hope that they could move forward with their lives. The detectives and officers who worked on this case were honored for their persistence and dedication. Their tireless efforts, combined with modern technology, showed that justice could be achieved, no matter how long it takes. With the East Area Rapist behind bars, the community could look to the future with renewed hope and strength. The case demonstrated the power of teamwork, advanced science, and the human spirit's unyielding determination. Be sure to come back tomorrow. For the next part of this story, we upload true stories every day. See you tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment down.